Oh,
And
the only thing
what did you say?
Oh, man. Sorry, Lee.
it said meeting in progress.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say about identity to start it off, because I really do have to leave very soon.
Mhm.
Loss of identity brings on grief for whatever reasons. That's what I would say about identity right now.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to get at this problem, Lee, is because it's so important to people. And I wanted to see how deep people think about it, and then how they think about it and what it means to them, you know. Um, so I think that there's some discovery, at least I hope there's some discovery for me in like just how people feel about identity. What do they do with it? Why is it important to them? So I'd like to get this started really by asking around, um, rather than I try to to define identity. I would like to know from you guys what identity means to you. When someone says identity, or when you say identity, what does it mean? Then we can get to, is it important, or and the other things. But every good conversation begins with a definition of terms. So you don't necessarily have to have the same definition of the term, but when you say it, it's useful to know what you're meaning. And we can't always keep that straight, but we can try. Okay, so let's go around. I'll go around on my screen. And if you don't want to talk or something, that's okay. I like to try to emphasize that. But this is a sharing platform, and that's what makes this work, is people, that's the whole point of it, really, is to share ideas. So if you have something to say, it's not important if it's, quote, right or not. It's you. It's what you think, and yeah, so we need to practice that. Okay, so let's start with Thea, since she's just right there on my screen.
Well, a couple things come to mind for identity for me. So I think about my identity as a public figure, being the manager of the outdoor campus for 25 years, and being, in media a lot, and being out there and people recognizing me because of that. And so that was one identity that we can delve into further if you want. But another identity is, I think, the me at home, and that I feel like I have two, not personalities, but two identities: the home me and the work me.
Okay, well, I have to say I have many personalities. I don't know about the identities, but and they all argue all the time. That's a problem. But I'm that said, I'm really looking for a definition. Okay,
Mhm.
What is identity? Can you state that in some other terms other than the word identity?
Sure. Let's see. I believe it's who you are, it's your morals, it's your upbringing, it's your outlook, it's your education. I could probably
Okay.
list a lot more things, but that's a
Okay.
start.
All right. Okay. All right. Good. Lee, what do you think identity is? What is it to you?
Well, the meaning of it, as you are asking, I would say it's how you think you are perceived, but also you think you don't really know, but you imagine or think how others perceive you.
Okay.
So it's a two-way meaning, because I wouldn't say it's black and white, but it might surprise you how others identify you,
Mhm.
because I'm sure it's probably not the same. So
Mhm.
I would say it identifies you as a person.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Todd?
Okay, I hope this works. I was thinking very much along the line of Lee. In my world, I think of three though. The two that Lee talks about, how I identify myself, how I think I am, the beliefs I think I own, and the actions I think I'll take under certain circumstances, and then what others think I think, or how I will act. But also, and this has been something that's been relatively recently, is like other people, how they present themselves. I mean, it's like also considering how they define how they think they will act, how they will be, how their actions are, and who they are. It's like a third thing that's really relatively new in my consideration, but that's been a lot because of recent identity kind of politics stuff. And I don't mean it like politics like Republican, Democrat. I mean like in how you fit in society.
Mhm. Okay, good. Anyone else care to give us their definition of what you think identity is? What do you think it means to you? Anybody?
This is Donna. Can
Mhm.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I guess when I think about it, I think about past and present. And I used to think it was when I was in school, um, the schooling that I had. So I was a student. And then I got married and I was a wife. And then I had children and then I was a mother. Um, and then I had a job, and so that was my identity at that time. I was a manager, and I was successful. Um, but then when you retire, and this past year being inside during the pandemic, it made all of that um, go away. And I was, we were by ourselves, and it really caused me anyway to really wonder who I was. And it was almost losing identity.
Interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. Anyone else? I see Miss Naima has joined us. And we're asking Jessica and Naima, since I think you guys joined us after the question was asked, give us your definition of identity.
I'm thinking. I'll get there. Give me a sec.
Okay, all right. Anybody else?
Identity. The
What is
thing
it?
that people worldwide use to, what should I say, use to identify things? No. Use to classify and categorize.
Okay.
That's the only thing I can think of. I did think about it as I read what we were going to talk about. And that's the only thing I can come up with.
Mhm. Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna, I think kind of along the lines of what some people have been sharing, almost, I feel like there's two sets of identities. There's my internal identity, how I perceive myself, but then unbeknownst to me, because I can't think not as myself. There's what other people identify me as. So I mean, yeah, kind of that categorization as far as an external party might use to identify, me.
Okay.
If that all makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, if it makes sense to you, that's what we're
Okay.
asking. Like, what do you think? And then if we can get it, then good. And if we can't, we'll work on it.
All right.
Anybody else? How about Ms. Festival? No, that's just kidding. Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to throw out a working definition. And it's not to say that this is the definition. It's just a working definition or something. Since other people seem to be struggling with it, I'm going to offer one. Branding. It's a way to brand ourselves. It's the same way that brands use to say this is who we are, right? We had to have a concept of what that product or that company stands for. It's your identity. It kind of like is a summation of all the things that you represent, all the things that you do, both how you see yourself and how others see you. So to me, you funnel all that in, including the things that have been said already this morning. It comes down to branding. Comes down to, okay, this is my brand. And just like a brand, if you put energy into a brand, at least for a business, if the brand's image is tarnished, sales go down. They suffer consequences for damaged branding. If the brand goes away, or if the brand is confused, in other words, people think, oh, that's a construction company, and another person says, oh, that's a food company. If people are confused about the branding, people say, oh, that's a gay rights organization, and you're actually a construction company. That's probably not a good thing, because your branding, people have confused your branding. So people are very protective, so people, and so it's about image, right? And I find that very curious. Curious in multiple senses, because it's the veneer of who we are. It's not really the who we are. It's the veneer. But since people often only see the veneer, or they only are aware of veneer, it's like an avatar, it becomes us, and the way it is, identity is a kind of avatar equals identity, So that said, let's move on to some other explorations about identity. Why is it important to you? Yes, go ahead, Claude.
Okay, I was going to mention this at first, but I think it's probably more appropriate here. So as a young man and a young adult, and still today in large part, my religious training actually was based on a lot on identity. So the way that I guess I was trained was to identify myself to the attributes of godliness or goodness. That was a key part. And then, really that was my prayer, right? That's my daily thought. That's how you start the day and end the day. But beyond that, kind of beyond the brand part of it, was to work diligently to see others in the same way. And what that did, I mean, I'm not saying that's a salve or an answer to anything, but it does provide a working model to find common spaces. And in our brand, we do share one brand, which is humanity. And so if you work in that mode, it was so important to me, that identity part, that it was just the way I chose, that was my code and ethic, particularly when I was trying to kind of figure out who I was, try to figure out my identity, figure out my brand. And that was where I began. And so I don't know if I activated as consistently as I did when I was younger, but it's now more of a habit. And I think to me, it really is just as important how you identify others, and not by, things that I want to identify people before I see them, kind of, like say, hey, you're part of this human race and you have these things in common. You've talked about that. One of the key things is that commonality. I really, really believe that when we work towards identity, it's best to start there and work out. That's all.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think it gives you a reason for living and a direction. Once you've lost one identity, because you have many identities or many roles or brands, but to continue on truly being happy or content in living, you need to know that there has to be some sort of an identity and feeling of self-importance, or not necessarily importance, but a will to have a goal or aim in life.
Okay, excellent. Anyone else? How about Crystal? Okay, so while you're thinking about that, is identity important, and if so, why? And by the way, if you come up with a question, a comment on something we've asked previously, just identify what it is you are working on, or you're talking about, so that we're on the same page. But feel free to go back and oh yeah, I thought of that. Now I know the answer to that question. Feel free to go back into that question. Okay, so why is identity important? And if so, why?
The ability to identify a rattlesnake as opposed to a garden snake or garter snake, whatever. I've never learned the name of that thing. But it's not poisonous. So you'd have to know the difference between the two to be able to be okay. I work at labeling due to the current situations that people find themselves in. At one point in time when I was younger, I was a change agent. And then I was something else and something else. Because to be a change agent was not a good thing, because you were identified as wanting to take down the government and some other things. And I said, no, that is not what, no, I want everybody to hug and love. So then I had to change that to meet what the perception of what I said I am was. So it's ever changing. And it's sort of like our tribe. You know who your tribe is by your label and your identity. And yeah, so it's an important survival mechanism, so to say. And it's ever changing, like Lee said. you go through so many different things. When I was single, I didn't have children. When I got married, I became a mom and a wife, so on and so forth. When I got divorced, I was a divorcee, and that was a whole nother thing too. And I just, had to get rid of that whole label because they thought divorced women at that time were crazy. So I had to get rid of that. So, yeah. So, yeah, it's a survival mechanism.
Mhm. Anyone else? Go ahead. Thea.
I liked what Naima said about it being a survival mechanism. I think that identity is important in the sense too of following the rules. And how I describe that is I grew up in a very political family, and we had some rules, because what the kids did would reflect on the parents. And growing up in government, that is an identity. And so my identity was permanently, I think, and still is linked to that of my parents because of that role.
Mhm. Yeah. Anyone else? Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else? Is identity important? And if so, why? Well, let me throw out a few things, and then maybe you can react to them if you haven't pulled together your own thoughts. Because, I always recognize that a lot of times the questions I ask, the reason I ask them is because I have a sense that people haven't thought about them before. So, so spontaneous answers are welcomed here, and I will not attach your identity to the answers that that you come up with, at least the first time. After that, you're on your own. Okay, but I think identity is attached to a fundamental question that humans often are faced with right from birth. Who am I? Who am I? We can find ourselves suddenly when we're born and become aware of our identity. We're aware that we're there. We have this sense of like, how did I get here? You have consciousness, and before you weren't conscious of this consciousness anyway. And then suddenly you're in this body and you're conscious of being in this body. And after a while growing up, you realize that your body is separated from mom's body. And then after a little more, you recognize that you're separated from other people. And then a little more, you realize that other people have other thoughts and have other experiences than you. And that always pushes you back to that question, or raises that question again. Who am I? Right? And that can be a very frightening question because, the answer, the default answer is nobody, but that doesn't feel good, So you have to, and absent an answer to who am I, the default answer is nobody. And nobody means I don't exist. And that's not what the brain likes to do, that you don't exist. That's not a thing for the brain. The brain wants to say you exist and you will exist forever. Actually, that's a lie too. But but the brain is working on that. And so there's an uncomfortable feeling with I'm nobody, or I can't identify myself. So I think we started working on that. We start working on building an answer to that. And I don't want to take up all the space here, but there's a lot that follows that journey and that quest to find out who am I. Does that resonate with anybody?
It really does. I think, one place I've seen that like very viscerally demonstrated recently for me has been dealing with someone with dementia. And it seems that their greatest distress comes when, we speak of a certain identity that they're not cognizant of and then can't make that connection.
Mm.
Because what you're saying that, and you can see it like happen viscerally, like I'll say this, Ma, you're, well, I'm your daughter, or this, this is what, we do. It's like, oh, here's how I'm related to you. Oh, here's this, remember this. And when they can't make that connection, you can see her start wringing her hands immediately. And you can just see the nervousness, like, I can't connect to that, which is, again, what someone else identifies them as, but is spoken as if it's a sheer fact. And it is, I mean, relatively speaking, but not being able to connect to that does, I'm sure, feel like I am nothing, or at least I am not whole. And so that idea of like who we are, how we get to that, like who I am, so I'm not nothing, it depends not only on our own feelings, but others and how they see us and our ability to recognize that. I mean, identity is really such a strong part of that.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think going off of what Todd said, although I agree with what he said, I do think identity has become a major factor in politics with people who they just want to identify with something, be known for something, be part of a group, be united that way. And when it's not necessarily that person's own internal beliefs, if it's just something else that they're kind of, grasping onto, that they don't, it's not something that they originally would have thought of on their own, and they're just kind of like, well, this is my identity now, I want to do this and this.
So if I'm understanding you, Ryan, the implications of what you're saying is that we may join that group to kind of create or support some identity that we have because we think something that they're doing we identify with. But then after that, we can find ourselves looking to the group to give us an identity, to tell me what I believe, to tell me what I feel, because I got this good feeling from you on this level. But these other parts of my identity, because it's not like a one monolith thing, it's a multiple of pieces that go together. If I'm understanding you, and I'm trying not to put words in your mouth, I'm asking you really, so even though I'm saying this, is that then you start to look to the other group, to that group, to fill in those empty identity spaces?
Yeah, and I think once you've taken on that identity, and I think people in America really are looking for an identity and have been for a long time. And so once they find something, they may, once that's their identity, it's hard to back off and be like, well, maybe I don't like that, but that's my identity now, so I got to go with it. And there's a book called Tribes by Sebastian Junger that talks about just how people used to be more tribal, well, years ago, obviously, but now that people have moved into suburbs, like he said, the biggest time when people come together is during some kind of disaster or tragedy. And that actually kind of makes them feel better about themselves than just going about their daily lives, like coming together for some kind of tragedy. Just a sense of belonging and belonging to something. And he argues that people haven't had that for years. So I think the more these things come to light, where there's these identities available, I think that's part of what's polarizing everybody, is because, well, I haven't had an identity, but here's something, you know, that can be my identity now. And whether or not it's everything you believe or not, it's kind of, I don't know, I think that's a little bit dangerous. That's a really good book. I would recommend. It's a really short read too.
Well, as you say that, I remember in my early radio career, and I was working with a merchandising manager. And so it was my first lessons in marketing, even though I didn't know anything about marketing before, but he taught me a lot. He sent me on a quest, you know, to like find these different brands, you know. And long story short, because it was a very interesting project he sent me on, and the only point of the project really was to teach me a lesson about branding. Cut to the chase for this conversation. He pointed out to me that Marlboros and Winston's came off the same factory line, same paper, same tobacco, same everything, same filters, everything. Only thing they changed was the branding. And he pointed out how strong people's brand loyalty was, and that it was connected to their identity. I'm a Marlboro man, I'm a Winston man, you know. Even so far as the Winston, both Winston and Marlboro had the soft pack and the hard pack. And there were people who attached their identities to whether they smoked the hard pack or the white or the soft pack. And they would not smoke one that came out of a hard pack, even though if you switched them, they'd never know because it was the exact darn cigarette, even with the same name on it. But their identity was attached to what kind of cigarette they smoked, you know, and that was very informative to me. You know, it's that, what, you know, because for me, I just smoked any kind of cigarette, but no. And then once he pointed it out, I could see it, you know. Before I just, you know, it said, oh, this guy doesn't want this cigarette. He doesn't want a cigarette from this guy, you know, because back at that time, everybody was smoking. Then, or not everybody, but so many people, you felt like everybody was smoking. So that was very informative to me about how people form an identity of who they are, you know. So if you can do it on cigarettes, it seems like it's pretty easy to do it like on politics or religion and go into that thing that you're talking about, Ryan, you know, like, okay, you know, I'm looking for something else outside of me to tell me who I am. Yeah. So what are the upsides of an identity? What is it useful for? Maybe I shouldn't have inserted that comment first. It primed you.
I think, you know, what Ryan just said in some sense, I mean, obviously it works together to find, it can work together to find common ground, to create actual movement. You know, when you identify with others, if you find some commonality or you make a commonality, it allows, you know, a lot of times things to get done. You know, I think of a lot of times identity in the form of like that movie Witness, and how, you know, these people build houses because, you know, that's not a common thing, but they identify to that. And they all you know, there's such a strong sense of identity that becomes part of them. That's part of their actual identity. And then you become that because you've identified it.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a sense there, and I only use the house as a metaphor, but I always think of that. And when I think of identity in a positive way, that's the way I think of it.
Mhm.
You know, I think of like, oh, you find common purpose, and it allows you to do more than you could as an individual. You're able to kind of create groups. That's in the positive way, of course. And I also think, like I said, and I've used it to find like some commonality, which allows for conversations to begin. If you can't find any commonality, a conversation has no starting point.
I would say you're not looking hard enough.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I agree. Huzzah.
Yeah, because, you know, humans have too many things in common, you know, not to, you know. Yeah, anybody else? Something that's an upside of identity. I mean, we all want, you know, people look for and work on their identity. So that should be a low-hanging fruit question, really, you know. What's the point of it? I mean, what do you get out of it? You know, what is it, how is it useful to you? Dun, 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 dun. Okay, go ahead there.
There's a guy here in town, and he sells commercial real estate. And he works for one of the big companies. I can't remember which one, and that's going to be my point. He has created his own logo. It's in the business colors, but it's his own logo, and people recognize it. It's on signs all over town. He still works for that same company, but it says Ryan in a great big letters on all these different signs around town. So the benefit of that is he's created an identity for himself outside of his business, but still related to his business.
Okay. So what you're saying is that by creating that identity, at least for public consumption, he can spread his branding and give people a sense that they know him,
Right.
even if they don't.
Right. It's just
Yeah.
like everybody can still sing the jingle for the other realtor here in town, because we heard it in the theater all the time when we were growing up and when our kids were little. They create their own identities that help them in their careers.
Yeah. Anyone else? How does an identity, whatever yours is, how does it help you?
My identity has people guessing, and that's exactly where I want them. I fit into so many different categories. People just don't know where to put me. So I slip in here and slip in there, and it's all good.
Yeah. So if I'm reading you right, that, you know, you find let's say benefit in having multiple identities, so that it's like having a ring full of keys. You know, you can like,
That's right.
you can go to anybody's bathroom.
That's right. My identity is definitely a master key, because what you see isn't always what you get. You know, sometimes I'll have that RCA Victrola dog where I tilt my head and say, what? And then I have to repeat what it was that they said. And having repeated that, they say, oh, well, that's what I said, but boy, that really doesn't sound so good.
Mhm,
Yeah, so
mhm,
that's what it is. I am a, oh, that would be good to put on a website. The
mhm.
Master Key Woman.
Yeah, I think you should. I think that says T-shirt.
Oh, T-shirt, yeah. Well, I can't
Because
do Queen
because
of
the
the
website
Universe.
they
Steve.
won't they may not be able to connect it, but if they see the T-shirt, oh yeah, that's what she is.
Yeah, and then there's that. I could have a little thing that says underneath all of this is a T-shirt that identifies me.
Ooh, that sounds way more inviting than you might want.
See, words. The identifying words are appropriate. Thea and I can't put ourselves as queens of the universe anymore with our cats being,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Mm.
it's all good and it's fun. It is fun to work with people and see their reactions. As as long as it's like the doctor do no harm. It's
Mm.
okay
Mm.
for me anyway. I do it gently.
Interesting. Interesting. Anyone else? I sense that most people find an identity, however they create that, as something useful, something that, as was said before, kind of blurred now on who said it, but it was said before, when you lose that, when you lose your identity, it's, let's say it's not a good feeling, okay? Or when your identity is tarnished, it's not a good thing. So clearly, we take it seriously as a rule. We take it serious. So I'm looking for, what is the upside of it, or what is the benefit of of a of an identity? Well, let me throw out a few, and then maybe you can add to it. Okay. One is it allows people to start a relationship with you. Right? You can put forth, they can have a sense that they know you, good or bad, but they have a sense that they know you even when they don't, because it's your branding. It's like if you say Del Monte, you can put anything in the can, but and it can be and often is made by anybody. They just contract that stuff out. But when you put your label on it, when you put your branding on it, your name, people say, that I think there's a Bible verse that says a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. I don't know that there's a lot of people who subscribe to that, but anyway, it's a thing out there. And so people like to protect their branding, their name. Okay, so one of the upsides of branding is it allows others to know you or have an impression of you before they know you, if they ever get to know you. One often doesn't know oneself, so it gets tricky. But, at the 50,000-foot view, it allows people to have a sense that they know you. And the brain really doesn't like unknowns. It will fill in anything that's, if it's a vacuum, it doesn't like a vacuum. The mind does not like a vacuum. And so when someone says someone's name, the brain immediately tries to search their Rolodex for what does that mean? Searches for a face, and then the face maybe tells them, something. they start to look for identity. They start to create an identity for you. If you create the identity for yourself so that people have a sense that they know you, even when they don't, then you have, some advantage. That's why people hire PR people, to create an identity for themselves, even when people don't know them, Okay, so that would be, to me, that would be the thing that identities are most useful for, is giving people a sense that when they meet you, that you have they kind of have known you. And for you, if you have an identity, a sense of identity, it may allow you to create an elevator speech, even with no words. In other words, how you dress, how you carry yourself, how you look at people, your handshake, all of those subtle little things that say who you are to people, whether your shoes are shined or you have, shiny earrings or no earrings, all those, a ring in your nose, that probably says something to people too. But in other words, that look that you carry becomes kind of a branding, and so it allows you to tell people who you are, your identity. When that person wants to have the lime green mohawk, they want to tell people like they belong to a certain tribe, they have certain values, all kinds of things it tells people. Unfortunately, it doesn't always communicate the message you want, but it's branding, and it is an identity. So an identity allows you to say something to people, often without ever saying anything to people. So what are some of the other benefits of having an identity? Go ahead, Todd.
I think, yeah, just really briefly, I think what Ryan had spoke to a little earlier, which is safety in numbers. There is, if you belong to a group, it is always going to feel a little safer. Even if it's a group of two, it'll feel safer than a group of one. And that doesn't matter if you're in a minority or majority or whatever, there is at least a sense that you're not on your own, facing sometimes what others, like you said, you may look to project something, but what others might take from that may be something that you don't intend. And by having others who identify in this way also at least gives you a sense of some protection in that you're not standing alone in the universe as, someone's sole target of derision.
Yeah. What? Who's been talking to you about me? Yeah. Mhm. Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else? Well, I'm certain that there are other things, some of which may remain unsaid, but let's look at one other part of this discussion, and that is what can be some of the downsides of identity.
Hi, Lauren.
Go ahead. We were talking about you before.
Oh, were you? Oh, I know. I was in a meeting. I had to hurry up here. But I was just thinking, like I put on the chat that I've known you for a long time as the Vinegar Man. So that was like your identity. Like you started, even before I even knew, I know you, but I don't really know you, but your identity to me is the big vinegar man, in that I know you as a mover and a shaker, somebody who gets things started and brings people together. That's your identity to me. So like sometimes in my identity, like when I was working with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, when I was a volunteer, I would go into a store and then I would see, people maybe buying a 6-pack or a 12-pack of beer, and I'd be in line and they would try to hide it from me, and they'd say, oh, there she is, she's against drinking. And I said, I'm not against drinking, I'm against drinking and driving. And, so then the more we work with our jobs and what we love to do, then I think people begin to see that identity of us. And it's always, for me, I always have to be mindful because of my identity of like where I go. I'm always like thinking like, oh, if I am say I go to a casino, you don't ever want to go into the lounge, because people, if they see you, maybe you're just listening to music, but like in my community, if people see you sitting in there, they'll probably be like, oh, I saw her in the lounge. Oh, so that's, and she says she doesn't drink, so people like to make assumptions too about our identity. So it's good to have an identity. It's good to be in those part of groups. But I think when we talk about personal identity, it gets a little, it could be like really complex, I guess you can say. But, we have our own certain images of ourselves, and then people have images of us. And I think individually, myself, I try to live up to some of the images that people have of me, especially like young people, with, I want to always be good person. I believe that children learn what they live, and, the things that are more important, that the things that we do than what we say we might do. So I think those are some of, things when we think about images. So, or identity, who we are, and, how on when we take our last breath, what do we want people to remember about us? I think that has a lot to do with when I think about identity, and that part of it. What are we going to remember? So just some thoughts.
Yeah, excellent thoughts as well. I'd like you to expand a little bit though on what you're saying about, when we take our last breath, what do we want people to remember? Because that points toward that identity has something to do with immortality.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. I think
Okay,
it's,
can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, I'll just to say that, as we do take our last breath, and what are people going to remember about us? Because I think that's part of, when we leave this world for another, we don't just want to be gone. We want to leave something behind, mainly for our kids, for our grandkids, whether it be good words or good lesson or fun experience, good memories, words that maybe we, apologize, forgiveness, just being able to take our last breath and be, I guess, be at peace. Or, once we do take that last breath, everything is done, game over, it's done. Whatever you left unfinished, unsettled, unsaid, there's nothing anymore. So as I go about in my own image, I'm always mindful of that. And a long time ago, I heard some kind of saying about, you imagine there's a little bird of death sitting on your shoulder. I can't remember where I heard that, but I heard it in one of the cultures. And that, you always have that there, because that helps us to be reminded that, someday we're not going to be here. We're not here forever. We're not here for a long time. We don't know what's promised. Nothing is promised today or tomorrow. So creating that image that I want to portray is, or not portray, but live, that I want to live is really important to me. And I didn't learn that until as I got older. And unfortunately, that's how life is. We don't learn and really see some of these things until we're older. Then we're like, have these aha moments like, oh geez, you know, because like right now, some days I still make amends to my kids on some of the disagreements that we've had, because I don't want to leave when I take my last breath and have them, you know, thinking or regretting about any of that, you know. So I think that image is, you know, you just want to, for me, my image is, I just want to be true and good and kind, you know, as much as I can be. You know, no one's perfect, but it's a tough one. But I think what people see about us, even if they don't know us, how they're going to look at us, it says a lot in the things that we do, you know, in our communities, in our personal lives. You know, one of the things you see, like some people will be so nice out in community, you know, and their image is just spanking brand new. Everybody loves them. But yet when they go home to their families, they're like, oh, hey, you little crapper, get out of here. Go outside. Don't bother me. I'm tired, you know. So we always have to be mindful of that image of ourselves as, you know, even, and for me, it's important even at home. And you know, you got to have that conversation with your kids too and say, hey, I'm sorry, I had a long day, honey. I'm tired. You know, just let mommy rest for a while or whatever, you know. So just keeping those lines of communication is good to keep them open. So yeah, this image one is a pretty good, even though I came in a little late. I was trying to listen on my phone. I got one eye in my meeting and one trying to have one eye over here. Because I like these, I enjoy these Thursday discussions. So, but yeah,
Good.
that's kind of what I thought. You know, we're not here forever. So, you know, let's just do the best that we can, you know, while we're here for our image and what we want to leave behind when we're gone 100 years from now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Crystal. That was, I'm glad you came in anyway, you know, even if it was late, because you always bring something interesting to the conversation. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we're getting near the end of our time here, and I hope it stimulated some thoughts that will lead you to examine your identity and what you think about identity. And I don't anticipate that this will be an easy thought process, you know, because the more you think about it, the more things come up. And I'm hoping that these things will spark new questions. But something that Crystal said really kind of sparked something that brought to the top of mind, something I think it's really important to think about when one is identifying one's or creating one's own identity. You know, it's very easy to create an exterior identity, the face that you want others to see. One of the things that happens with us when we have the face that we want others to see and the face that we really are, and when especially when there's a wide gap between those two, is that the facade can become the face. You know, the facade, the thing that you put out there, it can start to become you. You know, because as some have said here today, you try to live up to that image, that branding, that identity that you have. The other thing that can happen is that there's a disconnect between the real you that you live with 24/7 and the you that you project to others. And that kind of disconnect is a lot of work for the brain to do, because it's like when you tell a lie and you have to keep covering for the lie and covering for the lie and covering for the lie. And then pretty soon you get wrapped up in the thing that you were saying, you know, because it's hard to remember all of those angles, because it's like operating on two different realities, and they're like trains going down different tracks, you know, and you're trying to get them to go in the same direction, and this can be tricky, you know. So one of the things that causes that is that we feel that other people won't accept us for who we are. And so we try to bend that to fit the identity that others will accept, so we can be part of the tribe, so to speak, right? So that we can be part of any group that we're with. So, I don't know that that's avoidable at some level. I mean, one could make the case that, look, sometimes you have to go along to get along or something. I mean, you could make that case. Sometimes it's like, okay, I'm not going to like raise this issue right here and be stuck on this thing because, I want to get something else done, convenience. Okay. And there's lots of other reasons. I can get that. But I would caution that the more that happens, the more that you will lose track of who you are. And the fundamental question of why we have an identity is trying to answer the question, who am I? And that is the thing that you have to struggle with every day. Everything, it's important to remember, nobody lives with you as much as you live with you. You are stuck with you 24/7. Nobody else is, right? They always have to go off to the bathroom or something they have to do that they're not with you, but you are stuck with you, even when you go to the bathroom, especially when you go to the bathroom. That may be the only time you're only by yourself, but you're stuck with you, So I would say that the most important person that you have to satisfy is you. You have to live, but that requires being honest with yourself and saying, who am I? And then what are my goals? Am I trying to be the best person? Do I just want to have everything for myself, or do I want to have others share with others? Who is that person that I want to be? Okay, so I hope that it will, this conversation will encourage some deeper thought into how you build your identity, what that identity is, and how that identity answers that question, who am I? Well, that's all we have for this week. We'll see you guys next week on a brand new show. So join us next week, same time, same station. Goodbye.
Thanks, Lawrence.